Hi and welcome to this tutorial on how to use the Siemens S7-1200 PLC with Factory I/O. In this video we'll be making use of the control panel functions to operate the conveyor system by programming the PLC in ladder logic, so stay tuned. Right, before we start coding, let's take a look at what we are trying to achieve and the amount of code required for operation. Firstly, I'd like to say this is the way I've set up the system. There are many other ways of doing it. However, once you've watched this video, it should give you a better idea of how to go about it yourselves. Right, let's start Factory I/O and take a look at the control panel functions. As you would expect, to start the system we press the green start button, but as you can see nothing happens. The reason for this is the way the system is programmed. So let's zoom in a bit so we can see the panel functions a little clearer. To start the system, the selector switch is required to be in the automatic position. So let's rotate the selector switch to auto. Now let's press the green start button and see what happens. As soon as we do, the orange stop light goes out, the green start light comes on, and the entry conveyor starts moving pallets to the small loader conveyor to transfer either left or right, depending on the height of the boxes. It all seems to be working well, so if we press the stop button, the entry conveyor will stop after the last pallet is loaded, or as soon as the last box waiting at the beam sensor is loaded. Here we go, the last pallet waiting is now loaded and the entry conveyor will stop. Notice any pallets in transit going either left or right will continue, but the entry conveyor stops, meaning that no further pallets and boxes will enter the system. Great. Let's try to start the system again by pressing the green button. Again, nothing happens until the selector switch is toggled to manual and back to auto. So let's do that. Manual and then auto. Now we can press the start button again for the entry conveyor to start, and away we go. Let's press the stop button again to review what occurs. The last box waiting is loaded and then the entry conveyor then stops. So let's toggle the manual auto switch again, and this time before we restart the entry conveyor, let's press the reset button and see what happens to the display. The display resets to 0. Now when we press the start button, as soon as boxes are loaded onto the entry conveyor ready to be transferred, the display is incremented by 1. The next box is coming in and the display is incremented to 2, and so on. Okay, this time we are going to select the emergency stop button to see what effect that has on the system. I'm just waiting to get a few small height boxes onto the left conveyor. Here one comes. As soon as it starts transferring, we'll press the emergency stop. The difference with the emergency stop is that for safety reasons, all the conveyors stop and the yellow bed and chains also disengage. Also notice that the e-stop activated light starts flashing, which helps distinguish from a general stop. We'll add this light to the control panel during the tutorial, as if you can remember it wasn't there originally. We could have flashed the stop light instead, but by adding an additional light means you will also get an insight into Factory I/O and how to add additional equipment to mimic your actual production plant. Let's come out a bit wider to see if there is anything else on the right conveyor. That last particular pallet and box must have exited. Right, let's zoom back in a little and get ready to restart the system again. Now the procedure is as it was with a normal stop selected. However, when we disengage the emergency stop, the red light still flashes until the selector switch has been toggled, after which we can restart the system by selecting the green start button and everything should continue from where it left off. Here we go. And as you can see, the system continues exactly from where it left off, and the amount of boxes continue to be counted. As I said earlier, this is my own version of the control panel, and someone else may program it slightly differently. So let's stop the entry conveyor again to make sure that it is functioning okay, and then stop factory I/O. Now we'll just scroll down the program to give you an indication of some of the code we will be entering in this tutorial. So we'll be adding 3 more resets in the first network, which will only activate once, which is on startup of factory I/O. Let's scroll down some more. We will add in another network after the first network, which we will name panel functions. As the name suggests, it's for all the push buttons on the control panel. We won't need to add anything to the loading network. We will then add another network for counting the total amount of boxes being transferred and display that on the panel. There are no changes to the transfer network required or to the right and left conveyor networks. But there are quite a few changes required in the outputs network, although a lot of code is repeated in most branches, so it may look more complicated than it actually is. However, we will go through it step by step. Now I'm going to stop the PLC and go offline using the TIA portal, and then close the project. Then I'm going to exit factory I/O. This does seem to take a long time, so I'll just speed it up. So I might go silent for a while. Okay, now we're ready to load the program prior to the changes required for the panel functions, and also load the factory I/O conveyor setup prior to me adding in the extra panel emergency stop light. So let's load factory I/O and open a scene called My Sorting by Height System. And we'll move it to the right, giving us half the screen for the TIA portal and half for factory I/O. Now let's open the program and go into the main OB1 and make sure we've loaded the right program. Okay, that's the one. Now the first thing we are going to do is program the start and stop buttons on the control panel. To do that, we will need to add a tag name in the tag list. So let's go to the bottom of the tag list, and I will call it Start System. So let's type that in and enter. Notice it automatically adds bool for the data type and M0.5 for the address. On this occasion, that is exactly what we require. Now let's go back to the main OB1 and enter some ladder logic. Okay, let's go to the top and check we are in network 1, which we are. Now let's come down to the bottom of the network and add in a reset coil for M0.5, which is the start system bit, which we just added to the tag list. Okay, that's done. Now we need to go to the top of network 1, select the network and then select Insert Network to create a network between Network 1 and Network 2, which will become the new Network 2. And the previous Network 2, called Loading, will then become Network 3. Now let's name Network 2 Panel Network and enter the code to start and stop the system via the green Start button and red Stop button. Right, let's bring down a normally open contact for the Start button and address it I 1.0 for the Start button. Then we'll bring down an output coil and we'll change it to a set coil, then address it M0.5, which is the Start System bit. Now let's add another branch, but first I'll give us a bit more room. That's fine. And I'll select branch and add another input coil. Make it a normally closed coil because the stop button is wired true. Then we'll address it input 1.2, which is the stop button input address. If I can get to it to accept the address. OK, done. Now let's add an output coil and address it M0.5, and this time we'll make it a reset coil, which tells the system to stop. Now let's scroll down to the output network at the bottom and make use of the M5.0 coil. Right, the first change we'll make is to the first branch in the network, and we will add the Start System coil just after the pallet sensor input so that the entry conveyor starts up as soon as the start button is pressed. I'll put it in the loop so that once a pallet has started to load, the entry conveyor doesn't stop until the pallet is fully loaded. You'll see this in action shortly. So let's address it M0.5 for Start System and enter. Then we'll need to go down to the bottom and add the logic code to illuminate the start and stop lights on the panel. So we need to add a normally open coil for M0.5 to turn on the output coil, Q0.7. Which is the address of the start light. Now we'll add in another branch, and this time we'll add a normally closed contact for M0.5, which will turn on the output coil Q1.1, which is the address of the stop light. That's all for now. Looks good. Now I'll just compile the code before downloading it to the PLC, and it all looks fine. So let's download the program to the PLC. Here we go. Continue without synchronization. Select load, then finish. This does seem to take a long time, so I'll just speed it up, and hopefully we should be ready to start testing the program so far. So let's go online and start monitoring the PLC code via the TIA portal and run the program. I'm just going to get a better view of the control panel by rotating the scene around. That looks better to show the controls. Then let's connect and run factory I/O. Now let's select the start button and see what happens. Okay, pallets start coming down the entry conveyor. And transferring either left or right, depending on the height of the boxes. If we select the stop button, we will see that the last pallet that was detected by the beam sensor is let onto the small loader conveyor to be transferred, after which the entry conveyor then stops. Now let's press the start button again, and as can be seen, the entry conveyor starts up again and the system works as it did before. Let's press the stop button again and see if everything is okay. Don't think I pressed it. As you can see, it's sometimes difficult to select the buttons when you haven't zoomed in. Let's try again. I think we got it that time. Okay, the entry conveyor stops after the last pallet detected is loaded, which is then transferred. Now let's press the start button again to make sure I did everything according to plan. The entry conveyor starts again, then let's stop it again. Well, try at least. Wait for it. Yes, that has stopped the entry conveyor. I think we can see the system is working okay. So let's stop the PLC and go offline. Then we can start programming the emergency stop button. Okay. The first thing we need to do again is bring up the tag list and enter a tag for an internal bit, which is set once the emergency stop has been pressed. We'll call it emergency stop active and enter. The data type and address follow on automatically from the previous start system tag, so that saves us a little bit of time. Great. Now let's go back into the main OB1 and start entering some code. Let's scroll to the top network where everything is reset when factory I/O starts running. Then we'll enter another branch and add a reset coil for the emergency stop active tag that we've just set up. Let's select reset and enter M0.6, which brings up the tag, and then enter. Now let's scroll down to the next network, the panel network, and enter some code there. Let's add a branch and bring down a normally open contact and address it M0.6, so that the start system bit M0.5 is reset when the emergency stop is activated. Let's finish that branch into an OR configuration. Now we can add the code in to check when the emergency stop is selected, and in turn set the M0.6 internal bit, which can be used in the program to stop all outputs running. We need a normally closed contact for the emergency stop. This time let's have a look in the list to find the input. There we go, it is input 1.3. Then let's add an output coil and make it a set coil and address it M0.6. And enter. There we go. Right, let's add another branch and add a normally open contact and address it input 1.3. And then add another output coil to reset the emergency stop active internal bit M0.6 if the emergency stop is not activated. So M0.6 and enter, and change the coil to a reset coil. Okay, that's done. So the next thing we do is to go to the outputs network right at the bottom and enter the M0.6 internal bit in series with all the outputs as normally closed coils, so that when the emergency stop is pressed, the whole of the system comes to a standstill. So let's scroll down and enter those contacts now. So we'll do this branch by branch. Okay, I should be able to do this without thinking too much. So we just have to enter the normally closed contact, address it, and then enter. As simple as that, really. So I'm just going to continue putting them all in now, so I might go silent for a while. Okay, so we can do it on the start light too. Then for the stop light, we can have it in parallel. So we add a branch, then a normally open contact to keep the stop light on, as the start system input 0.5 will be reset in network 2 when the emergency stop is pressed. Now let's just compile the code before downloading it to the PLC, and it all looks fine. So let's download the program to the PLC. Let's speed this up a bit. Then go online and run the PLC. Let's just stop factory I/O, then start it up again so that everything is reset in the first network of the ladder logic as we start up factory I/O again. Good. Now we can press the start button and pallets will travel down the entry conveyor. Let's just test the stop button before the emergency stop button to make sure we haven't affected anything there. Okay, stop selected. The entry conveyor stops, and then press start again, and that looks fine. Now let's press the emergency stop button and everything comes to a halt. Great, that works. Now let's see what happens when we release the emergency stop button. As there was a pallet ready to go onto the loader, that continues on. and the right and left conveyors start up again too, but the entry conveyor is stopped just like it was when the stop button was pressed. So the way to get it started again is to press the start button again. So let's do that. And the system starts up again. All looks good. So let's press the emergency stop again and go through the process one more time. So select the emergency stop and release the emergency stop button, and it does exactly the same again. Now this is not an ideal outcome when the emergency stop is released. I'd much rather a procedure was put in place to start everything up again so that the entry conveyor, the small loader conveyor and the left and right conveyors didn't start up as soon as the emergency stop is released. And that is what we're going to implement in the next video. So once again, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed and would like to see more videos like this one, then please hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it, so you'll be informed when a video is uploaded. And please feel free to ask any questions in the comments area. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.